Technology is awesome, but it can also bite us in the cellulitic butt. Okay, let's see. It says we're live. No, it does say we're live. So let's see. Do you guys see us out there? Because if you do, let us know. Oh, so it did record me saying cellulitic butt. So just go ahead and let me know that we are live. It says we are live. Okay, so now that we are live, we are going to start the class. No, I'm just going to hit the record button and we're just going to have to get in the moment and dance because we've got a good class today. So starting the class. Okay, everybody, get ready to get in the moment. It's time to dance and let's learn and grow together. Here we go. I don't see a share.
I haven't been made co-host in this new
not
one.
for this one. Hey guys, we have opened like 3 different chats. So make sure you open your chat, Melissa. Okay. Here we go. Hopefully we're going to go live. We're going to do the dance. Let's go. There we go. It's almost there. It's almost there. We're going to have a great class today because it's just something that doesn't want to be heard here. Here we go.
The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear, bridges we burn, we make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be right here. Right here, and when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for
you. This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friend. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are tuning in to the classroom for the first time, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening and my viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, as many of you know, and I've said this so many times over the last, I don't know how many years, that unfortunately it takes trauma, drama, illness, sickness, loss, whatever it is, to stop us dead in our tracks and say something different has to happen. And for many of us, that's the only way it's going to happen. For some of us, we learn from other people's mistakes or learn from other people's journeys, and we create our own choices ourselves. But today's teacher is no different than most of us, which is they learn from their own crisis. And so today we have Dr. Melissa Gallagher, ND, and she has learned, unfortunately, like I am learning today, like you are learning today from our own trials. In 2003, I believe, she experienced severe illness, and it was Epstein Barr. And because of that, because, you know, what is intended for harm, God always intends for good. You know, it became a blessing in her life, changed her career, changed who she is today. And because of it, which is the 4th level of responsibility, is taking what happens to you and using it for the greater good, she now spends her life teaching people how to reverse Epstein Barr and other conditions, because today we're going to talk about Epstein Barr virus and how to prevent and reverse it, how to diagnose it, and more. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that Dr. Melissa Gallagher, ND, is here to do just that. Welcome, Melissa. Thank you. Thank you. You know what? It was one of those things where I didn't know if this conversation was going to happen, but I really do want to make sure that we get to every detail of the class. So if you guys don't have extra time to watch it, just know that it will be on BitChute and Odyssey, Facebook, and YouTube. So unless we say something we can't say on YouTube, then it'll be on BitChute and Odyssey only. Okay, that's the disclaimer. Dr. Melissa, share a little bit about your background. Thank you so much for being here. Share a little bit about your background and what led you to your passion today.
Sure, absolutely. So basically, I in my early 20s was starting the career path and was working hard, burning the candle at both ends, had a lot of stress, was active in my community. And literally one day I could not get up out of bed. And, I was a vibrant, youthful, energized young person. And it was an interesting journey trying to figure out what was wrong with me. For 3 months, I just thought maybe I'd had a really intense case of the flu. And then I was falling asleep at my office, and literally one of my bosses had said, I have this more open-minded doctor that I think he can figure out what's going on with you. And so that kicked off my journey. And he was great. He was a more functional medicine doctor, but an MD focused on assessing, like you said, I think you have Epstein-Barr, but we don't want to guess, we want to test. And so let's analyze the antibodies in your blood. And there are varying forms of Epstein-Barr, and let's see kind of the severity level. And when my test came back, I was in a full-blown active Epstein-Barr viral infection. It had overwhelmed my body. I was dealing with some other kind of immune deficiencies because of it. And when, I got my diagnosis, it was like, okay, great. Like, well, what do we do? Like, is there a pill? Because I was in my 20s, I thought there's a pill for this. And he's like, no, there's nothing I can give you. Rest. And I recommend vitamin C. And you are probably going to be dealing with this for about 9 to 12 more months. And that's it. And so I was like, wait a second, like that is not serving me well. And so that was a pivotal point where I remember thinking, I cannot believe that the medical provider here can't do anything for me like that. What is his job? And so I went to a GNC later on that night. I was living in Tampa, the Tampa area. And I think I spent like 3 hours at the store. They had this encyclopedia book. You probably have all seen it, where it's like A to Z. And I was like mono, and then Epstein-Barr. I was like juggling these 2 pages. And then I was like immunity. I bought a book that talked about the immune system cure because, I at least knew that it was the immune system. And that was the beginning of my exploration into natural ways to heal my body. And it was truly, as you say, a blessing in that I ended up going a more natural route in my own healing process. So I worked with a doctor of Chinese medicine who was really doing innovative things. She even focused for me, she went to Bastyr for 6 weeks to do this really in-depth PRP at the time, incorporated that. And this is back in 2003.
Yeah.
It was early on, and she did an injection, an acu-injection, and like life-changing. It just changed my life. And the diagnosis kind of kicked me into looking at what Dr. Maria had done. And I said, I think by my 3rd visit, I want to do what you do, but I don't want to do the needles and stuff. And she's like, well, you probably have to go back to school. And so that kicked off my professional side of digging into natural medicine. And went on for a master's in nutrition because I was definitely changing my diet, recognizing that eating certain foods were not promotive of healing. And so it's this whole lifestyle change of how I live my life, how I practice stress management, how I kind of balance exercise. It was probably exercising too much. And so it was literally like a stamp in my life. Like that day I couldn't get up out of bed, changed everything.
Wow. And, unfortunately, we sometimes have to get to that point because we really do. In our 20s, especially, we think we're invincible and nothing's going to happen to us. We could do anything we want to do because we're made from rubber and we bounce and we don't stick on walls. It just comes. So that is our mentality. But as we get older, we continue that mentality until we hit the wall again. And so for me, that has been something that I've noticed after I got something similar where, that I lost my sense of smell and taste, but I never tested for it. So I assume something caused a reactivation. So let's talk about what with me. So I'll share a little bit about me so that we can maybe use me as a live case as we go forward. In January, I lost my sense of taste and smell and was exhausted to the point, but that wasn't the only time that exhaustion has happened in my life. Car accidents, closing a business, those different things in life were just paralyze you at times. And then you just move on because what can you do? You just move on, no time to rest. And so this last one that happened, I, again, just could not I couldn't eat. I couldn't break out of it. But I've noticed that afterwards I was getting lots of mouth sores. I was having a hard time sleeping. My digestion was off, way off, more than normal. And I sat down. I've spoken to many, as I speak to world-renowned health leaders, and so everybody had like a advice for me. But this time I said, I need someone for me that can just work with me here locally. I live in Merritt Island, well, in Cape Canaveral, Florida. So I'm sure you're familiar with Florida. And so I started talking to this doctor and they said, could you have Epstein-Barr? So when they tested me for two things, which said I've had Epstein-Barr in the past. So I started doing my research and discovered that that there are other tests that can confirm without a shadow of a doubt if it's activated or reactivated. So as a child, I had chickenpox. As an 18-year-old, I had mononucleosis. That's all I knew. I did not know that Epstein-Barr was dormant in my blood system. And share a little bit about Epstein-Barr. I was surprised that 90% of people have it dormant in their body. So share a little bit about Epstein-Barr and who could potentially have Epstein-Barr dormant or reactivated in their body.
Right. So what's really interesting with Epstein-Barr, it is what we consider a silent virus. So you can have exposure to an infected individual, but not at the current time have that infection. So this is one of we call it the opportunistic viruses. And so, for instance, when we get plagued with a major life change or stressful event. So car accidents are really big, changes in job, moves, divorces. For women, pregnancy can be a big one. The act of pregnancy is very stressful to the immune state and also postpartum. So there are triggers that we see that can have create the environment inside the body where the virus will now manifest itself. And so that is where we tend to see more positive VCA IgGs. And so there are active Epstein-Barr virus tests that we can take that will identify. We also have an EA-D IgG, and that'll tell us if we have a current or recurrent infection. And then we have the antibody test, which shows sometimes previous infection, even though we might not have registered it. So for your instance or your case, a mononucleosis the underlying is always Epstein-Barr. It kind of depends on the provider who gives you the diagnosis, but that is what we see the manifestation. And the challenge is that, where I look with patients, I have a lot of folks that like to self-diagnose, and, Dr. Google is great. And I do YouTube content all the time. And so a lot of folks will utilize a lot of the resources I provide, but nothing is more comprehensive than actually testing. And we do have the tools to be able to analyze, are we in an active state and or have we had a previous infection? Because what we see is Epstein-Barr is a very, very overwhelming virus, very similar to the current pandemic-related virus that we've seen. It can change DNA, and it can also change how certain organs and systems are functioning. We've seen with Epstein-Barr, individuals have cardiomyopathy. They will have changes to their cardiovascular health, not so intense as the current virus, but viruses have an interesting survival mechanism, and part of their infiltration in the body is to, attack the body in a certain way. And we live in a symbiotic state. And so if there is an attack, it's going to affect all aspects of our body and our health and wellness. So with Epstein-Barr, that reactivation or even previous exposure, we will see the net effect be more of a chronic fatigue syndrome. And it's a deep mitochondrial, deep cellular immune imbalance. So the footprint is a deep immune imbalance in a state where our cell health is greatly restricted or limited or overwhelmed. So we can see that, we're not as robust. Our cells aren't as robust. We're not getting that kind of cellular turnover. We're often going to be plagued with like inflammatory conditions. And that's where, with the current state of the virus, we see the epithelial cells be overwhelmed. We have neuron damage. And that repair can be influenced by our inflammatory levels, Epstein-Barr reactivation, and stress-related conditions that we experience. And we're also seeing with the current virus, we're seeing a leaky brain. So we know leaky gut is an influence, but leaky brain is a whole nother category that we're dealing with. And that all on its own can be a stressful state within the body. This is a biochemical stressor. It's a an actual neurological state where we have an inflamed brain.
Wow.
And the way the body's going to process that is it's a stressful event. And so that can then lead to several things. When we have these tight junctures in the brain, blood-brain barrier, just the inflammatory cytokines that the current virus creates, it breaks down that blood-brain barrier. And that is not something we want to have broken down, because now we've got access for pathogens, viral particulates, assorted bacteria overwhelm. Now that can get into the brain, cause additional inflammation, limit and restrict the lymphatics. We're seeing sleep imbalances, and that all is this underlying perfect environment for an opportunistic virus like Epstein-Barr to rear its ugly head.
Okay, so that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this class with you today. And I'm going to do a series of this because not everybody watches one or the other. And so hopefully they'll see that I really mean business with this, because when you call it an opportunistic virus, Dr. Richard Horowitz, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's an expert in Lyme, and he calls it an imposter. And so it's, it imitates, Epstein-Barr could imitate Lyme. It could imitate all these other things. And so, but what really caught my eye was about 2018, when I first heard of Epstein-Barr reactivation. This is how it was explained to me. And I immediately went to get the test. That, and correct me if I'm wrong. And I spoke to Dr. Ron Honeyhacky about this. And so he was also in agreement to this, but I just want to make sure that I confirm this over and over again, because this is what people need to nail today and get. Not everybody who has Epstein-Barr has other conditions, but everybody that has multiple sclerosis, cancer, Lyme, fibromyalgia, what other diseases has Epstein-Barr, as a co-infection, as something that's underlying. And what I found out in 2018 that I did nothing about, other than go to this doctor who said, yeah, you had it in the past. Well, what do I do with it now?
Right.
He didn't know. He couldn't help me. And so now that I feel like I've got some tools with all the teachers that we've had in the classroom. What I learned was that the virus acts like a cloak, because we have these healing cells. I believe they're called T cells, right? The T cells are like our little Pac-Mans in our body, and they come and gobble up anything that's not looking good. And what happens with Epstein-Barr, as I understand, it covers or coats, the imposter, it covers it so that the T cell can't gobble up whatever infection is there or whatever is not working right. But here's what really blew me away, is that it doesn't matter what treatment you do. If you don't take care of the Epstein-Barr first, nothing will take, right? Yeah. I see you nodding your head. So
yeah.
Okay. So I'm just saying this in layman's term, because sometimes when doctors say it, it sounds so much more. And so far you've been, at the second, 8th grade education level or whatever, so that all of us can understand and get this. When somebody gets a cancer diagnosis or a multiple sclerosis diagnosis, not now, more doctors are knowing about this now with multiple sclerosis, but they don't say, let's treat your co-infections first and then do whatever treatment you choose for, even if it's natural or chemotherapy. What warning can you give somebody that may have a diagnosis of some other kind, has gotten into the white coat trance, and they hear and obey and they do whatever treatment the doctor says, and how the body's not going to respond until this underlying condition is taken care of?
Yeah, I mean, and this again, don't guess, test. That's like my motto, because, you cannot assume anything with the body. We have to have actual clinical data to analyze whether this is the case. But we definitely do know, and this is not singular to Epstein-Barr or the current, virus that we're all dealing with worldwide. What we know is that viruses, they have their own survival instinct. So when they come into the body, they are not only opportunistic, some will be dormant like an Epstein-Barr, but they also have mechanisms that can help shield them from our immune system. And that kind of cloaking, we actually call that
that's
biofilm.
my Harry Potter.
Yes,
my Harry Potter cloak.
Yeah, so it's called biofilm, and bacteria and viruses create, that's a byproduct of their existence. Some, like in Lyme, some can be very, very ninja, with their biofilm production. So that kind of cloaking biofilm that they create, it does overwhelm our immune system because the T cells get eaten up. And so, our frontline defense mechanism is going to wane with that virus. And when we have a defense mechanism, our frontline army, that is overwhelmed and compromised, now, if there is any other immune imbalance, and, we all are dealing with cancer cells every day, that's every not day. An unknown, it's how well our immune system functions. So when we have a dysfunctional immune state, because it's been overwhelmed, our T cells aren't responsive, we're seeing that more cellular level imbalance from an immune perspective, then we see some of these other diagnoses creep up. And they can be there without the knowledge of the medical provider that's providing care and the patient in understanding that, Epstein-Barr may be an underlying element and core infection that needs to be addressed. Yes. So, and the other thing too is, I think one of the advantages of the last 2 years is we are seeing massive amounts of virus-related research, and studying and analyzing is always important from a scientific perspective. What we're seeing is greater awareness of what reactivation looks like. I mean, there were times where I'd tell friends when I was in my infection, dealing with Epstein-Barr, they didn't even know what that was. Now we're seeing more common discussion. And that I see as the positive silver lining, is that we're going to see more medical providers tuned in and aware that, an assortment of long haulers, which now I'm dealing 60 to 70% of my patient practice is a long haul patient, because it's churning up that deep cellular immune imbalance. And now they're dealing with gut imbalances. They're getting diagnosed with C. diff, and they've had no antibiotics.
Mhm.
We're seeing, cardiovascular imbalances and poor lymphatic flow. And which is one of my specialties that I zero in on, supporting that whole detox process, because there's a pairing of our lymphatic system with our immune health and our detoxification garbage disposal system. And that's another element where Epstein-Barr can really overwhelm the lymphatics. And so that kind of detox process, we've noticed people are going to have more swelling. They're going to notice lymph node engagement, where they literally get really hard.
Mhm.
And those are some signs for individuals to look for. The lymph nodes are a big tell in the Epstein-Barr world. And, up here, we have lymph nodes all throughout our body. We have them up here in our neck, and then the groin, the inguinal nodes. Those tend to be the ones that really get engaged with Epstein-Barr virus.
Yeah.
And the spleen, we'll see enlarged spleens. We see an overwhelm from our immune and lymphatic organs.
And again, the reason why I believe we have to have this conversation is that people go into the diagnosis and treatment with medicine, or treatment with chemo, or treatment with whatever it is, without looking beneath the surface as at the root cause, or some of the causes that could be doing that. And like Dr. Horowitz says all the time, it's an imposter. So you think you're taking care of one thing, but really it's not. So what are some other, because this was one of the things that I said to my doctor. I said, I take vitamin C for asthma. That's what I do. I take vitamin C for asthma, and I wasn't responding. I needed to take more and more and more and more, and it wasn't getting any better. But it wasn't a full-blown attack. It was just wheezing and not feeling like I was breathing as clearly. And so that was, and then I was getting mouth sores and fever blisters and all these things. And so he was the one that said, let's test for Epstein-Barr. And I'm like, I did that, in 2018, and they didn't know what to do. So here were the 4 tests, and maybe there are more. So I'm going to write it down like I learned it. I'm going to say it. Okay, EBV, which stands for Epstein-Barr. Everything's going to have that EBV in front of it. AB, VCA, IgM. So that was the one, and then EBV, ABVCA, IgG. And then Epstein-Barr nuclear antigen AB, and then the early antigen ABLG, IG? Okay. So are there any more tests? Because before, the doctor just did 2 tests, and my current doctor only did 2 tests. And because I did my research and I sent him the information, what I love about him is that he replied back, watch them all. Some things I knew, some things I didn't. We need to retest. And I knew that he was partnering with me. So is there anything else that we can, I asked my husband to get tested, and his doctor said, no, I'm not going to test you. So let's talk about what language we should use when we go to our practitioner and say, we want to be tested. My wife has this, or my partner has this, my child has this. I would like to be tested too.
So, it's disappointing to hear, these stories of medical providers, because the reality is, when we are living in a familial setting, everybody in the family has been exposed. And so, there's two parts to this. One, the presentation from a patient perspective, advocating for healthcare, would be, I know via testing, so clinical data, I have proof that I have had, close and continued contact with an actively infected Epstein-Barr virus patient. And I would like to find out if I too have been infected. And so like, those are very like definitive, like I've had this exposure, it's confirmed via test. And because I live in the household and she's my wife or my child,
and she kisses me a lot.
I need to make sure that, I too, and we're not in this kind of crazy loop of this virus.
That's right. I get better. He gets worse. He gets worse. I get better,
Yeah. So, and that is something where, I always kind of advocate that we have power as patients. And so if a provider, poo-poos or downplays or minimizes, there are other providers who will take the appropriate steps that the patient is asking for.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, that we've seen in the last 2 years is there's been a much better accessibility for labs, private labs.
Can you do those labs privately?
You can, in some cases, depending on the labs, but we're now seeing much more of the technology where we can do blood spot testing. We don't have to have, venipuncture for, a lot of the assorted tests, but, and if it is required venipuncture, any lab will take a person with a kit and you just pay for the actual blood draw, the cost of that. So, and a lot of patients don't know that you can get your kits and take them, without necessarily that doctor script. But the empowerment component, we have to advocate until we get the answers. And if, clinicians are not going to be partners with us in that journey, then we need to find others that are going to be more receptive to the concerns we have. And it's, at the end of the day, it's our health and wellness. And a virus like Epstein Barr it's an overwhelming one. It does a lot of damage in the body, and being as proactive in that either preventative process of minimizing the explosion of the virus or limiting a reactivation, because that's always an underlying element. Once we've had it, we've got exposure. It's now taming the beast, if you will, and really, really doing everything to wipe out the viral infection. It's supporting the mitochondrial health. It's, supporting and boosting up our adrenal glands that get overwhelmed by the virus, and really kind of fortifying and balancing, modulating the immune state. And it takes a lot of effort. It's not an overnight process. And so when it comes to asking a clinician, it's okay to fire providers. There are many of them out there, and you will find somebody that will work with you to get answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the reason I hired my doctor. He's actually a doctorate in nursing. And, and so I've known him for a while, and I reconnected with him again. And I sat down with him and we had a conversation, and Dr. Ron Honeyhacky calls it CoLearning. He calls it CoLearning. I want to co-learn with my doctor. I want us to work together. And I want to encourage all of you to take that ownership, because we get into this white coat trance, that this is what I call it, because I got in that white coat trance too in the past of my life. And just recently, when I had a gallbladder incident, and it was like, remove it stat, you got to make this doctor's appointment. And Dr. Jennifer Graham had said, Lily, no, stop, while you're waiting for the doctor, because I wasn't going to do it, but I didn't know what to do at the time. And Dr. Graham had said to me, let's do a cleanse. Just do a gallbladder liver cleanse and just see how you feel. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And everybody, I'm talking everybody in my family, except my husband. My husband supported me.
Yeah.
Everybody thought I was being irresponsible. So we not only have to take a stand with our white coats and not hear and obey, just step away and do your research, because usually things are in our body for years before they get diagnosed. Anyway, what's one more day? What's one more week? It's not going to change anything. I mean, maybe I'm wrong with that one, but once you detach yourself and do whatever you can, because obviously I didn't get sick because I had a healthy gallbladder or I had all the nutrients that I needed. And so I needed to figure out what the root cause. But let me tell you, one day of fasting, I felt so much better. and I was curious to learn more. What do you say to someone who goes quickly into the treatment without taking that pause to say, what's really happening here?
Yeah, I mean, it is, it really depends on the diagnosis. I mean, and this is at the end of the day, people have personal choice. And so how we may view it may not be how everybody else views it. And that's okay. I always have, and I work with a lot of cancer patients. I do a lot of pre and post operative care and kind of helping with, post biopsies and assorted cancer related surgeries, as the lymphatic part of my practice has really gotten me into more of the cancer circles. Mm-hmm. So, regardless of the diagnosis or path to healing, whatever that looks like, I always recommend people sit quietly with themselves in a journal and kind of meditate over how they're feeling. And to do that in a place of privacy that is also not influenced by family, because a lot of times it's the family, close family, that are going to hear a diagnosis and the fear sets in, and it's totally, normal human behavior. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the patient experience and the healing process after, treatments or chosen plans are implemented, the patients have to be okay with them. And I see sometimes the dichotomy of patients doing things that they're doing it for the family and not themselves. And it's not rooted. It's not a lot of power behind that. And, our brain and our energy reflects that as that healing process deploys. But really sitting with that intuitive state. We have intuition. It's another sense we don't always kind of dig into here in the medical community. But I mean, for instance, I can speak to one case more recently where I had a patient that just had this knowing sense something wasn't right. Diagnostics were challenging to get, but she just knew something was not right. Well, just like we know something's not right, we're going to know the best direction for us. And to really zero in on what that looks like, it's either through prayer or meditation or, extemporaneous journaling or whatever that is. That is kind of the beginning of what I recommend, because in some cases, I mean, for instance, like if you have a ruptured appendix, well, that's not really one you want to take time for.
That's right.
So there's degrees of, what that looks like. And, when we look at, I am not the individual that's going to poo-poo the medical community. I work closely with them and I, work with clinical trials in my practice. But one of the things that we have to recognize is that we have, unfortunately, a medical industry of illness, and it's a profitable industry. Mm-hmm. It is not profitable for us to have people heal outside of some of those traditional models. There's no money to be had, and insurance can't bill for certain medications, and whatever that looks like. So we have to be cognizant that there is an industry when it comes to, unfortunately, our healthcare. And a lot of the advocating does require our time. It often requires our out-of-pocket costs. Mm-hmm. That is outside of this mindset of insurance and copays and things like that.
It's all about control. It's all about that mindset of control. Yeah.
Well, and it's, and I get this because I'm a private pay provider. I'm preventative in the majority of what I do, even if a patient has a diagnostic, diagnosis and an ICD-9 code behind their label. But I'm not billing insurance because I have the capacity to depart and deploy a lot of different treatment resources. And I'm not just following this one protocol that's been approved, accepted, and insurance paid. Mm-hmm. And that is, some people don't have the advantage of having extra finances to go outside of that model. But we do have an amazing capacity to tap into our healing process. There are a lot of things people can do for free that will help support their healing, making slight and gentle switches to the foods that they're eating more dense, colorful, rainbow-like foods with high nutrients, whether they be organic or not, that's better than corn chips in our standard American diet.
Correct.
So, because that's sometimes a barrier where people say organic fruits and vegetables are really expensive. I'd rather you eat our conventional blueberry than, reaching for sugar-laden processed foods that can sit on a shelf for 5 years. So it's a challenge, but we're our best advocates and we know for ourselves what's going to be best for us.
Great points. And I want to remind all of you that if you type in a queue and you write your questions down, we will ask your questions during this broadcast. Because of all the technical difficulty, I did not ask if Dr. Melissa had any time afterwards to do a teacher's pet corner, but because we started late and I don't know if you have a scheduled event after 1 o'clock.
I don't. I just have my lunch.
Okay.
So I will we'll eat it for my lunch.
Okay, maybe we'll do 5 or 10 minutes after the class. So ask your questions. But before we do that, I just want to let you guys know that if you want Dr. Melissa's number, your contact information, you already have it because last week's blog had all her information on there. And so I want to encourage you to go to whenyounneedafriend.com, become a subscriber. And when you subscribe, go and play and look at all the information. Dr. Melissa talked about how there's a lot of things we can do for free. So there's a lot of resources at whenyounneedafriend.com. We also, so like and follow me on all social media, including BitChute and Odyssey, which we're trying to increase because I'm being garbled and censored. So I want to make sure that we are preventative and we are proactive instead of reactive. So help us with everything that you are, that you can do by sharing the information and sharing it with your friends. And so one last thing is I want you to, look at my sponsors, look at my little Shop Now bag. We're doing a 30-day raw vegan challenge that we're on our second week, but you can join us at any time. Last night we had Anna Maria and Bryant Clement in the classroom to talk to us about the tips and tricks of raw vegan and more. I mean, it was it blew us all away, all the information that we got. And we get a lot of information here in the classroom. It was even more and deeper. And so check out all the different workshops that we're doing. And especially if you want to do some soul searching, we have Dr. Lorraine Day's 12-week course with the lessons from the Exodus and the book of Revelation that we did together. So there's so many different ways that we can learn and grow. And most of it is free. Most of the content on my website is free. And you can also become an enrolled student in the classroom and give your time, your talent, your treasure, and whatever you can, whether it's $1 or $1,000, help us grow the classroom. It's become more and more expensive to do this class 3 times a week. And so anything that you can do to help will be wonderful. I want to tell you that today we have Dr. Melissa Gallagher. She's a naturopathic physician. And I believe you're now in Texas, right?
We are. Yes, we moved here in the fall.
Even though you're a Florida girl, you're in Texas.
Yeah,
it's time to come home. It's time to come home. Okay. And you can find her at naturalhealthresources.com. Yep. Also, you have a free guide. So share a little bit about the free guide that you have.
Yeah, so it's a guide to really kick off the Epstein Barr healing that zeroes in on 5 kind of key steps to address lymphatic drainage, to address the deep cellular imbalance, to address we use homeopathy a lot to really target some of the antivirals. So there's a really great antiviral that we recommend, but it really zeroes in on the 5 kind of key steps to address and overcome Epstein Barr virus for the long haul. And it addresses those immune cells that get gobbled up in the kind of, pathogenic process that Epstein Barr has within the body. So it's been something that goes back to my own healing process. I've since tweaked it as, new resources come about or more educational. It's been education I've researched and been a part of with it. And it's been amazing for hundreds of my patients who have overcome and have not had any reactivity past the original infection.
Well, while you were speaking, I didn't mean to be rude, but I was very curious as to what this is. So I copied the link. I will put the link on the description of the video. Believe it or not, people don't know that there's information on the description. So there are links and all this information. So check out the description that will be either above or below the video. So just click on and check out the verbiage on there and read what it says. So I'll put the link. Is that a link for everybody that they can click on?
Yes, absolutely. It's a free resource. So it's my gift to everybody to help kick off and promote their healing. And really, it's an empowerment tool. There is change that you can create in your body.
Absolutely. And, as I learned in my life that we need to be our own MD. We need to be our own medical detective. And so whatever it takes. And for me, it's interesting how you talk about our intuition. My intuition at the beginning of the year, I said, we're going to do a raw vegan challenge. 10 years ago, I was challenged to go raw vegan for 1 month. And I was in the class at the time, it was a radio show, and I did it. I actually said, fine, bring it. I can do anything for 1 month as long as it's legal and it doesn't harm my body. And so I started it. And after 4 days, I felt really good. But here's the deal. I didn't know I felt bad. I didn't feel bad. I just didn't know I could feel better. And so these little tweaks woke me up. That alone just opened my eyes. And I'm like, gosh, if they lied to me about food, and food can make me feel this so good, what else have I been lied to about? What else do I need to know? And that started my journey of curiosity as to what are some other ways. Because my registered service mark is you can take a pill or you can take responsibility. And it's not that I'm against the pill. I am for doing everything you can to live that natural life. I mean, I know that these pills can be life-saving, especially during a moment that you are in crisis, but they're not intended forever. They're not intended forever. And that's what they say to you. You're terminal. They'll use these words that cause fear in us. You're terminal. You'll always have to take this medication. What do you say to people that have bought into the possible lie, the potential lie? What do you say to them about exploring maybe another way to heal naturally? Or I should have said heal naturally. Another way to progress and improve naturally.
Sure. Well, the one thing I always start off with my patients is in kind of an educational synopsis of the fact that our cells are constantly changing and we're always evolving. Up until we take the very last breath in life, we are producing an assortment of hormones. And for women, we are still producing estrogen and progesterone, despite kind of the thought process there. But our cells are constantly in a state of transition. And that is something we can tap into. We know that certain glands, and this is a good book that kind of I always reference, is The Healing Self by Deepak Chopra. It's a great book that came out, I want to say maybe 4 years ago, and it zeroes in on, the fact that like for the liver, those cells are always constantly turning, and it's a quick, speedy process. So if we have a liver state that's imbalanced or dysfunctional, or maybe you've been diagnosed with a non-alcoholic fatty liver, which is really common because of stress, high cortisol and high insulin, that can yield that, then that is something that can be easily eradicated over time. And by healing and detoxing the liver, you can take advantage of that cellular turnover. So it gets into, I know biohacking is really big right now, that kind of topic, but we know more and more about the way our body can clean up cells, like tapping into autophagy, i.e. fasting, extended fasting, tapping into that whole cell and immune turnover, like day 3.5 of a long extended fast. We can literally change the state of our immune system. Yeah. And we know that from science. So we know through research, and we know now there's human trials that are going to be published, I think in May, by Dr. Longo out of UCLA in conjunction with his facility in Italy. We know that we have a healing capacity. And so it's something that, not everybody is tuned into that. So that is a form of empowerment, just to know our cells are constantly changing. And we can change the state of our health by changing the state of ourselves. And so starting with that premise that sometimes alters how people perceive a diagnosis. It's either short-term or long-term, or like high cholesterol. That's a really common thing that people are being medicated for long-term. Statins were not analyzed in the long term, but we keep dispensing them. But addressing the liver is a really fast way to eradicate the need for a statin medication. But that all, it goes into knowing that we are in a constant state of change and we can change for the better.
This is great. I just want to say, to add to the liver, after I did my liver cleanse and it kept me from getting my gallbladder out, I decided I was going to do this with a group of people, whoever wanted to join me. And we do have it on our website at whenyouneedafriend.com. You can look at workshops. We did a 3-day fast, 1-day gallbladder cleanse. And all of us that did it together, it was a wonderful bonding experience. And we recorded it, and it's there for you to do it yourself. And I know that you, Dr. Melissa, have masterclasses and other things that you do as well. So they can go to naturalhealthresources.com to find that?
Yeah, naturalhealthresources.com. And I'm really big on all the social sites. So we have a Facebook page, so folks can follow over on Facebook. Your Natural Health Resources is how you find us there. And then Instagram is all the fun stuff, like what I'm doing every day and behind the scenes stuff and product reviews and things like that. So, Natural Health Resources is on all the platforms.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And because we have 5 minutes left on the podcast, and then we're going to continue with the Teacher's Pet Corner, asking your questions. Make sure you type a Q and write your questions down. I just want to make sure that we recap. If somebody has what are some of the symptoms that they might have, or a diagnosis that they might currently have that could have a co-infection or an infection that's underneath, such as Epstein Barr? What are some of the things that people should wake up to right now and say, I need to stop and look and see if I need to put this Epstein Barr in dormancy?
Yeah, so definitely Hashimoto's is a big one. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the inflammatory state of the thyroid. We definitely see a lot of involvement with Epstein Barr, MS, and assorted autoimmunity. So this could run the gamut, again, in terms of it could be an RA diagnosis. It could be a gut-related autoimmunity, Crohn's or colitis. We can see celiac disease. We can see a diagnosis of lupus, and there's 2 different kind of forms of that. And then for folks that we know that there are some cancers that are caused by viruses, and so that can be something that may be an area to zero in on. Symptoms, fatigue, overwhelming fatigue. Like when I say overwhelming, like the word that I always said, like it was debilitating. It was, I laugh about it now, but for like 3 months in that time frame, I didn't know what was wrong with me. And it took me like 4 days where I could actually get out of bed. I started running more. I lived in South Tampa. We have this beautiful long sidewalk that I lived right in front of. And I'd run that, and it would be like 6 or 7 miles a day. And so I was like, I'm going to exercise more and get my energy up. And then I'm going to drink more caffeine or eat more sugar. And it was this cycle. So debilitating fatigue is very common. Swollen lymph nodes. And this, this is a category that just identifies an immune imbalance. The immune system is communicating. Symptoms are your body's communication tool. So if we have any overwhelm or chronic state of immune imbalance, recurring asthma or sinus infections or, gut imbalances, sores are a big one, random sores in the mouth or on the scalp, changes, in terms of the skin texture. Those are key things to look for. As well as imbalances with heart rate. So, some of the cardiovascular changes, if people are getting more.
What about AFib? What about AFib?
So AFib, not so much with Epstein Barr specifically, but we know that other viruses change the kind of mechanical function of the heart. Specifically, we're seeing a lot of that currently with long haulers, and assorted kind of tachycardia, POTS-like experiences. POTS and mast cell is definitely another diagnosis that they'd want to peel back those layers of the onion and analyze. But yeah, we cannot underestimate the impact a virus can have on our body. And, some of the most important things we can do preventatively is to not so much, I'm not for like the boosting term, because a lot of times people are already over boosted immune wise. We want to modulate the immune state. We want it to be nimble. We want it to be responsive, and we want it to do what it needs to do. And so that modulation is really important.
Wow. Very good. Very good. We have about a minute left. I just want to let you guys know that we're going to continue our conversation, the Teacher's Pet Corner. Also, I will post the testing that I did that proved once and for all that I did have it, and it was a reoccurrence. So if you've had chickenpox, shingles, mono as a child, what else that could have it dormant in the body?
Yeah, even a measles exposure, depending on, some of the more severe flu could overwhelm the system. So those would be things we'd look out for.
Okay, so you heard it. We're talking with Dr. Melissa Gallagher, naturalhealthresources.com. We're going to continue. Make sure you type in a Q, write your questions down. We'll get them to before we go. And please remember, this is very important information. Please share it with your friends and let everybody know that this could be something that you could take care of. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Dr. Melissa Gallagher wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. We're going to be muted and we'll come back. Okay.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.
Because I want this information to stay on Facebook and YouTube, we are not going to be controversial with how it is acquired. But we know we've done other classes where other teachers have come on, and those are on BitChute and Odyssey as well. But yes, how much of the population, Dr. Melissa, have Epstein Barr dormant in their body?
Yeah, so the percentage is hard to nail down, but we know it's one of the most common viruses in the world. So with that being said, it spreads very easily via saliva, and it can be something people can get infected with and not have any symptoms. So it's not one that we're going to find on a CBC panel and kind of analyze just broadly because it's so overwhelming. I wish we would do something like that for sure.
Yeah. And this is information that people don't know. And the doctors specifically, most medical doctors, like the doctor that I went to in 2018, when I had this hunch that maybe, just maybe, this could be something that I need to look into. He did the test that he thought after he researched what test he would do, and he ordered it, but it just proved that I had it in the past. That's all he could tell me. But when I said, okay, now what? What does that mean? I've had it in the past. He said, I just can't help you. I just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And Dr. Henning, I shared the story last week, and he said, well, at least he was honest. He could have said, you don't have it, or, there's nothing you can do about it, or it's terminal, that type of thing. And so, yeah, I was grateful that he was honest, and I thanked him for that. But I moved on. I had to, I have to keep life. Like you said, you got up and you were running so that you can get your energy. But eventually running doesn't solve the problem. It creates a bigger problem. Mm-hmm. So if somebody has Epstein-Barr in their system today and it's dormant and it's been reactivated or reacted, I don't know what the proper terminology it is. and it goes on and on and on for years and years and years. What could potentially happen to that person if they don't stop and address this whole Epstein Barr or any other co-infections?
Yeah, and you just said it. There will be co-infections by nature of a reactivation or an active infection state. We will see a weakened immune system, and so we know weakened immune systems. It just opens the door for everything from strep throat and tonsillitis, sinus infections, gut-related infections. H. pylori that gets overwhelmed in the stomach. To, things like HPV and other overwhelming and potentially cancer-causing viruses that can create a lot of immune imbalance and cellular change within the body. So it's definitely not one we want to leave unaddressed. And, if you ever have had, the way I saw my exposure, I didn't realize this, but when I was in middle school, one of my best friends had mono. So she had Epstein Barr, and that becomes this infectious, mononucleosis. And we we spent the night, they live really close. We spent the night at each other's homes. No doubt that was my first route of exposure. And then my second exposure point was when I was a freshman in undergrad. I went to Florida State University up in Tallahassee. We were in the freshman dorms, and in November of, right before Thanksgiving break, one of the girls who was 2 doors down from us in the dorm was feeling sick. So she went home at Thanksgiving break, and it was such an overwhelming case that her younger sister during Thanksgiving break had a chickenpox exposure from her elementary school. And our friend, her system could not fight that. And we came back to school after Thanksgiving break to the news that our friend had passed because of Epstein Barr. It's no joke. And it is one of those where who would think a chickenpox exposure would be what took her, what just overwhelmed her system, and she succumbed to that co-infection. It was devastating for all of us.
When chickenpox occurs naturally in the body at the age of, 3 to 5, that age, I remember, I'm much older than you, but when my babies were younger and there was somebody that had chickenpox, we'd have a party. Come on, let's have a party. But now they're stopping this process, and there's so many benefits to getting chickenpox as a child that have been overlooked. And now when these people, that process of getting the chickenpox naturally is circumvented as an adult, when they get them, the body just cannot handle, because those were God just had a plan. God had a plan that the system would just build this immunity, but it would also give us even much more. There's so many benefits to getting chickenpox when you're young, right?
It is. I'm a little on the fence with that, to be honest with you, because we know that all of the massive cases of shingles are all from folks that have had the chickenpox exposure. And so that manifests in an adult life as shingles.
Correct.
Yes. And so that can be really overwhelming and, not necessarily debilitating, but extremely painful. And that's style of virus. It's a pox virus. And so pox viruses lay dormant. They lay dormant inside the spinal fluid, and often and overwhelm. And like our friend, for instance, her body was already overwhelmed. We were freshmen, we're burning the candle at both ends. We're in like a leadership, high kind of, high energy, active community in the dorm room, in the dorm program. And, it just was something, yeah, that was eye-opening that a virus could be deadly.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I don't want to get controversial because I do want this video to be in Facebook and YouTube. But here's what I know, that some of the exposures that we have when we have received different outside to keep us from getting this, like let's say we get the flu shot or we get all these, there are things in there too that could cause other problems as well. And I wish they would do a study on it. I wish they would do more studies on this so that we would know to have that freedom of choice, like informed choice, to know what are the pros and cons in making that decision. And everybody has a right to make that decision, and that's not my point, but to have informed choice is, to me, so important. So I have a question for you. And by the way, if your question is personal and you don't want to write it on Facebook or YouTube, you can text me at 407-373-5959 and then just write your question down. So I received a text, and this is something that I had talked about, that I had written down, and it's on the little corner of my notebook here. One of the people that because of you, you were one of the people I researched. That's how I found you when I was researching Epstein Barr. So thank you for your work on that. And I also found another doctor that I would love to have in the program as well, that to help others understand the importance of seeing if you have, first of all, knowing that you have a dormant is great. And chances are you do, but knowing that it's reactive, then reactivated, that's very important as well, because now we can talk about the solution here with rest and all of that. But you talked in your video about Epstein virus 1 and Epstein virus 2. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that was something I was not aware of, that there are types of Epstein Barr virus infections. And that was something that that was what my diagnosis was. There's EBV1 and EBV2, or type A, type B. And that's what, when I was in my early 20s, we test it. It's basically how all viruses are. They're protein dominant. And so it's a protein sequence and typing of the Epstein Barr. So and a lot of it, let me see if I can explain this. Like, there's kind of a genome typing. So a kind of form of the virus. One might be a little bit more overwhelming. We see this like with variants. We now know that term, what variants means. It essentially is like two variants. There's a milder version and a more intense version. And I had that too. I had the more intense version of the virus. And so the type itself will tell us the extent of the infection, like how long are you going to be dealing with this? That's how he was like, oh, you've got 9 to 12 more months. I was like, no way, I can't live like this.
And what is the number that you're looking for to say it's a 1 or a 2?
So it will, in the results specifically, it'll say EBV1 and EBV2. Yeah.
Okay.
And I granted, this was, my test was back in 2003. It's likely that we're seeing other kind of forms. I know that
EBV20.
I know. Yeah. And I know that, with a lot of my long haulers, their panels specifically, we're running, all of the inflammatory panels, but then EBV 1 and 2 are on those panels. And so, it may also be something where we don't always see that, but the lab is still sequencing the protein. So they're analyzing the protein sequences. The other kind of, gene typing factor is whether your clinician's even aware or going to communicate that type. So it's always important, get your labs, and have that documented clinical medical record, so that if you do see a more functional medicine provider, we look at those differently than often a lot of other providers will just go, oh yeah, you've got Epstein Barr, and they coded you and off you go. we're going to look at it, go, okay, we're dealing with a much more overwhelmed immune state. We need more of the deep cellular balancing and support, versus maybe the milder version needs some adaptogens and some gentle herbals to calm the immune state. The other side of it is a much more in-depth type of, red alert type of protocol that we need massive healing to prevent a lot of those longer term conditions.
Yes. And so I know that getting plenty of rest is important. What are other things that we need to right now that's free we can do for ourselves to love ourselves back to health?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm offering my free, I've created 5 steps to resolving Epstein-Barr as a guide that I'm providing for everybody. But within that guide, I highlight, we need to look at our stress management process because stress tends to be what is a trigger. So from, taking time out for self-care, when we don't employ or deploy self-care, that costs us, and it affects our immune system and our stress response mechanism. So that is, however people de-stress is something to tap into. Meditation, yoga, totally free. Walking outside in the morning, getting sunlight, getting nature, free.
All free.
So those are all really probably running.
We are so detached to nature, and it's no shock that we're so detached that, we're being pulled back in. I'm seeing so many people go back to basics like that.
Yeah.
Me
absolutely.
included.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it balances our neuroendocrine system. We see our neurochemicals balance. And that also is critical for recalibrating and bringing the whole central nervous system back to balance. A lot is controlled by our brain, the brain centers, the neurons, our neuropathways. And, viruses can attack our neurons, and they can cause impairment in these neuropathways that send signals, chemical requirements, communication to our organs and our glands. And so repairing is critical, but balancing the central nervous system is step 1. And so that's really important. And so I'm all about, being resourceful and, doing things that are free or limited in terms of, the overall cost. My favorite quote is a quote by William Shakespeare. And he says, our bodies are gardens and our wills are our gardeners. And so if we think about, for any of us who are gardeners out there, I'm a huge gardener, we have to plant seeds. We have to have a good earth. We need good, rich, plentiful, microbiome supportive soil. Our body's the same thing. And so we need to support our gut health as part of our immune state. And so eating well, hydrating well, getting the right micronutrients, minerals, and multivitamins and coenzymes are really critical to supporting and nourishing our body.
What would you say is the most important supplement or nutrient or mineral that we need to just, if we have nothing, if we do nothing else, what would it be?
Yeah, it's magnesium. So magnesium is needed in over 600 enzymatic reactions in the body. Magnesium, oh gosh, and there's a multitude of forms. Most folks are taking kind of low cost forms like mag citrate, but there are things like magnesium taurate and malate and glycinate that are beneficial for assorted body systems. But overall, magnesium, a good multi-magnesium is what I always recommend.
Really?
Yeah.
I've been having, is it chelated?
Yeah.
So should I change to having like a variety of them?
I would, and see if it changes, how your body is functioning. So magnesium taurate's great for cardiovascular health. So for instance, we know that certain medical conditions, certain viruses, pathogens our body is fighting will deplete our stores of micronutrients. And magnesium being such a critical precursor to 600 plus enzymatic reactions in the body, the likelihood of people being in a deficient state is really high. And we know like that, there's guesstimates, something like 80% of our population is deficient in magnesium. Our soils, even organic soil, is deficient. So it's by far, you take that, it will, and this is a big benefit of it, magnesium is powerful in articulating fluid that is harboring itself in the space called the interstitial space. So it's this fancy term for space in between muscle, soft tissue, organ matter. We see this also in our brain. Magnesium can rearticulate, and it actually pulls that fluid. It's inflammatory fluid. So this is an accumulation of cytokines and protein and just the inflammatory response of our body. It'll help rearticulate that, promote the lymphatics, and flush that out of our system. So when I have patients that say, I feel puffy and swollen, magnesium, boom, we will get them in a matter of a day or two. They'll lose 5 or 7 fluid pounds of excess because magnesium is flushing that and alleviating the inflammatory state of the body. It's amazing.
But you're talking about magnesium that have a combination of,
honestly, even magnesium citrate, even though that's not my favorite kind of recommendation, even just that can be potent and effective at articulating. Yeah. So magnesium across the board is amazing for getting rid of the inflammatory fluid that's a byproduct of inflammation and infection, viral or pathogenic exposure. It's amazing. It helps us sleep better. I mean, there are just so many benefits. Our skin health, the way our gut functions. It is by far, hands down, top one recommendation.
Well, this conversation isn't over. There's so much more we didn't discuss today, and so I want to encourage all of you to let me see if there's any more questions here. Vitamin C intravenous has been a game changer for a lot of people. Do you agree with that? Or, I mean, I totally love vitamin C intravenous or any kind of vitamin C. So what would you say?
Vitamin C is it's one of those core essential vitamins. It falls in kind of the water soluble category. And so those tend to be ones that we notice where we can have deficiencies in, like B's as well. For OTC supplement form, I love to go with plant-based C over, synthetically processed C. So like camu is a really good C option. And then also looking at any type of enhancements, like with rose hips. I actually go to our local store, and in the kind of loose herb section, I just get rose hips and I brew rose hips tea, or I'll add rose hips to tea. I drink teas all the time. But I'll add in little rose hips, and that is a great blast of vitamin C. And you can use that. There's a lot of versatility in rose hips.
I love that. I'm good. And hibiscus, I know, I have a local herbalist in the area in Rockledge, and I go there all the time. And she just mentioned rose hips, and she also said that she puts rose hips in her hibiscus, and so it gives me a double. Yeah. And then it's like I've noticed that I was starting to have pollen. I was using the local pollen and using the beeswax and all that. It was like taking a supplement of a upper or something. I couldn't sleep at night, so I have to go back to just 1 grain at a time. I just have a one of those responses that I cannot do that. But this is really great information. We have one question and one more question. We'll take one more question before we go. So Rosalinda says, good morning. Hey, Rosalinda, thank you so much for watching today. And all of you, by the way, for all your comments. How much and when do I take magnesium?
Excellent question. So again, this falls into that category, test, don't guess. So you can actually test your micronutrients. So just know that you can ask your clinician to run your magnesium panel, just like D and other nutrients. But generally what we see is anywhere from 400 to 600 milligrams is the kind of daily requirement. Some of my patients need more. Generally, most need about that 600 mark. But depending on your type, what I recommend is spacing out the dosing. So doing like a 300 dose in the morning and a 300 dose in the evening. That just gives you this gentle, gradual, kind of continual flow or support of magnesium, so that in the waking state, you're getting your magnesium. And then in the night state, which we have a lot of things that happen in our sleep that is very pro-supportive of our body, we definitely want to make sure we're getting magnesium to support all those functions.
What about the magnesium that causes diarrhea? Like the citrate, is it the citrate that causes the diarrhea?
Yeah. So yeah. And that very similar to like some vitamin C's are dosed to bowel tolerance. Some C's we can see people's bodies get used to higher doses. Where like some patients can't take 1,000, but some I could put 10,000 and they see no effect. So there's, really
I take at least 10.
It's body specific. But with magnesium, that's why I like a more multi-magnesium approach, because there are assorted types all systems need. It spaces out. You're not just getting 300 of a citrate. You're getting an assortment, a blend of them that are also synergistic in that functionality.
Now, when you take certain supplements, like for example, I just found this out that when you take K2, you need to take vitamin D at the same time. And if you Google it, it'll tell you to take D in the morning and K2 at the night. And so my doctor said, no, absolutely not. Bring it to the morning. So it's like, you can't Google these things anymore, because there's so much misinformation out there. Yeah. But with magnesium, is there a partner that you need to take magnesium with?
Not specifically, but okay. I like multi-minerals just overall. So like in my practice, personal practice and in my clinical practice, I recommend enhancing our water, because we used to have mineral dense water. We don't anymore, and I use my Berkey filter. I still enhance my water with multi-minerals. So I recommend kind of having all the minerals, make sure your water is minerally enhanced. And then you can take those individuals. But magnesium is not the sort that needs, it's not like a bee where you can't take one bee, you need all of the bees because they're friends and they all enter the body together. You don't need that. So magnesium is more independent. Mm-hmm. But definitely, adding minerals to your water, that's a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I noticed during this time before I discovered what that root cause was of my issue. Yes, my daughter was getting married. Yes, that there was that taste and smell thing in January that happened to me. Yes, putting all these things together, as it could be time consuming and could be stressful too. Good stress, bad stress, because I love everything I do. But, I started back in 2008, when my son graduated from high school, I was spending a lot of time volunteering at his school to make sure they had a senior party that they could go to that was safe. And I was I was part of that. And one day, I was getting these fluttering like heartbeats. And one day I just had to stop, because I thought, am I having a heart attack? So I went to the cardiologist. He told me that I had benign arrhythmia, not to worry about it, but that if it keeps getting worse, that they could come back and put me on a drug, which I'm not going to do that. But this was back in 2008. So moving forward, after January, I was getting these heart, like it was like my heart felt like it was like turning inside out. And I started taking CoQ10. And I know that you talk about CoQ10.
Oh yeah.
And my flutters went away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. CoQ10 is, the ubiquinol category is phenomenal. I lived in Japan for a year and they discovered the CoQ10 and they utilize CoQ10 to treat heart disease. It's not even a concept that we have here, but they do IV CoQ10, miraculous changes that occur. And I've seen it even within my clinical practice patients, the heart, damaged heart changing. And actually we see repopulation of the cells, vascularity flow, come back. The heart literally can come back to life. It's phenomenal.
Can you use CoQ10 like you use magnesium and vitamin C to bowel tolerance, or is that something that you have to be careful with the dosing?
So I have not had any, I haven't had any challenges with patients, any type of dosing. Like there are some, like I do some work with some mitochondrial like genetic mitochondrial imbalances. And like some of my patients, we have them on massive mega doses. That's really hard to find, honestly.
What's a massive mega dose? So,
I'm
not suggesting anybody does this without consulting their practitioner or contacting Dr. Melissa, but what would you consider massive?
Massive. So like 10, 15, 20,000 milligram doses. It's extremely, I will say this, and you know, we now have the mitoquinol, which is like blowing out just regular CoQ10, you know, so we're seeing a much more potent form that we can give the potency with a smaller milligram dose. But you know, any degree of mitochondrial impairment or heart or gum related tissue changes, CoQ10 is great for that.
Well, I tell you what, this conversation's not over, and we could probably talk for hours and hours and hours. And I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Melissa. Again, you can find Dr. Melissa at naturalhealthresources.com. She also has some courses that you can take, master classes, gut healing classes, and what was the other one? In May, you're doing a group, or what is it that you're doing in May?
So I run a masterclass or produce a masterclass every month. So May's class is mostly for women, but surviving menopause is our topic. And we're going to dig into perimenopausal phase, surviving that. That's sometimes a 10, 15 year process, and then menopause itself. So yeah, for all the ladies that are experiencing hormonal imbalances, it's going to be May 22nd.
May 22nd. And I have to ask one more question, because I know that this is something that I like to ask different doctors, because, you know, they're like everything, there's division in everything. And so I have a real dear friend that had breast cancer and had one breast removed. And so the doctors just didn't give her any hormones at all whatsoever. And she is in constant hot flash mode. Yeah. What would you say to someone that has been denied any form of hormonal therapy, with natural hormonal therapy? What would you say to them?
Yeah. So this is where it gets so individually specific, because our endocrine system is unique to our body. There are a lot of influences, like our gut. Like why I created my Healthy Gut, Happier You class is that the gut, our microbiome, actually controls more of our hormones than anything else. And so like, that's really, and our gut health is very individual and unique as well. So the one thing I would say to this is that there are, you know, depending on the cancer typing and the nature of the cancer, if it's one breast, it tends to be more environmental related than genetic, because we will see kind of the double side.
And it was the right breast, which is usually affiliated with men, and she did have a divorce. So
okay. Yeah, that's on point. So I always ask that. That's like my first question.
Just to give you
male or female problems, mom, you know, or dad or husband or like daughter, whatever.
Yeah. Or both.
Yeah. Sisters, whatever.
Because we marry our fathers, right?
Yeah. So it's one of those things where, you know, we are seeing that there are certain cancer types that are okay with more natural forms of hormone enhancements. The reality is that, like I had mentioned earlier, folks aren't familiar with what I had said earlier. The fact that we can be in our 90s or 100s and we take our last breath, up to that point, our body is still manufacturing estrogen and progesterone. So, you know, that is something that it can be an influence, whether it's negative or not. There are a lot of different ways to support the hot, flashy experiences. I will say, though, most of the kind of post-treatment hot flashes, it's still toxicity. So we're still dealing with chemo and even radiation. We'll see that for 10, 15 years after the fact. So kind of supporting the lymphatics, detoxing the system, and really zeroing in on the liver. The liver takes the biggest hit with all of those, you know, kind of post-surgical therapies. That would be the start for sure.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, like I said, we could probably talk for hours. I have really enjoyed you, and all the technical difficulties didn't matter. We still made it through. I hope that all of you who are watching realize that this is an important topic, one that your doctor may never talk to you about. So be your own MD, be your own medical detective, empower yourself. This is a class of empowerment. And because many of the doctors that we go to, that we hear and obey, have the same diseases they're treating you for. And they die at the same rates that we do. And so we need to be our own advocate and listen to our intuition and more. And so do whatever it takes to take your health back. And so thank you again, Dr. Melissa, for being in the classroom. And thank you all. Please share this information with everyone you love and anyone you don't even know that you love. So we'll see you soon.